Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at another range of introductory economic concepts. So I'll go through a couple of them now, and some of these we'll look through throughout the video. So firstly, the difference between consumer and capital goods, not a big deal. Just basically know the basics. The consumer goods are goods purchased by individuals or consumers, so basically people within society, and capital goods are goods purchased by businesses with the purpose of using those goods to then make other goods and services. So if you're purchasing machinery or equipment to then flow on to make other goods and services to help you to make consumer goods, then that's a capital good. These other factors we will look at throughout the video, so material and non-material living standards, economic actors. So economic actors include the consumers, government, and the business, and also the overseas sector, and looking at how each of those can face opportunity costs. So consumers, when they make decisions, if you decide to buy, a sandwich for lunch, you might sacrifice buying a pizza. That may be your second best alternative, which is your opportunity cost. The government may face opportunity costs because if they devote funds towards education, their next best option may have been infrastructure. And businesses, they may face opportunity costs with their time. They allocate resources to making a certain product. Whatever the next best alternative would be the opportunity cost. So, first thing, why do all countries face the problem of relative scarcity? Basically, define relative scarcity for your first mark. So it's the basic economic problem that our resources, always define what they are, land, labour, capital and entrepreneurial, are finite or limited, while our wants and needs are unlimited. All countries, regardless of how wealthy they are, have scarce resources, and therefore they have to make choices about how to allocate those resources to maximise our living standards. Even the richest country in the world can still only use, for example, land for one purpose, or use labour for one purpose. For example, land could be allocated to agriculture, manufacturing or recreation. Because it is limited, countries need to make choices about how it's allocated. So a clear-cut example will ensure that you answer that question in detail. Explain how individuals may face the problem of relative scarcity. Provide an example. Individuals face relative scarcity by making choices. For example, you want to eat for lunch, limited funds, you choose between a sandwich or a bowl of chips. Individuals also face scarcity with their time. So for example, if you make choices to go to university or enter the workforce, when you get home from school you watch TV or sleep, all these are examples of having choices that are related to relative scarcity. Explain why a decision to address the problem of relative scarcity through equal allocation of resources may be seen as unfair. So because we have limited resources, what was the problem with doing that all equally? Many would argue this is unfair because some citizens work a lot harder than others and therefore deserve a greater share of income and access to goods and services. It may be argued that it is unfair for someone who is not working with no legitimate reason to get the same access to land and wealth as someone who has an education and works really long hours. This is a trickier question. Explain what is meant by the following statement. Economics is about how resources are allocated amongst competing uses. Okay, what you really want to get across in your answer is that you show that you know what resources are and you know what it means by resources having competing uses, which basically is a fancy way of saying resources can be used for multiple things. So our resources define what they are. Land, labour and capital are finite or limited and can be used in a range of different ways. For example, water is a land resource that can be used for drinking, can be used for watering plants, it can be used for agriculture. As a society, we must make choices about how we will use that resources and where we will allocate those resources amongst the varying competing uses in order to maximise our living standards of citizens within society. So that wasn't really very well said. So really what you want to do here is show that you know what resources are and provide an example of a resource like water or labour that has a range of different competing uses. Water is a good one because it can be used for so many different things. What is the main way we measure material living standards in the economy? How can a country boost its material living standards? The main way we measure material living standards is GDP per capita, income per person. A country can boost its material living standards if they increase the total value of the goods and services they produce at a faster rate than their population growth. So the total production or income within a country, if that grows at 5% and the population grows at 4%, then on average people have more income per person. It's a measure of our purchasing power and it's best measured by real GDP per capita. Two examples where there might be a trade-off between improving our material living standards and maintaining our non-material living standards. Again, sure clear that you know what both concepts are. One's about GDP per capita, the other one is about other quality of life factors like stress and health, etc. They don't always correlate. One example would be you may increase your GDP per capita because employees work longer hours, but they have they're more stressed and less job satisfaction. Or the government may enable the mining of their natural resources, which boosts incomes, but it may lead to increased pollution. So pollution and working longer hours are two good examples there. What do you think is meant by the term rational economic actors? Those are people that weigh up the advantages and disadvantages or the costs and benefits of a choice and only choose a course of action if the benefit exceeds the cost. Why is a car waiting to be sold in a car yard not an example of a capital resource? The reason for that is it is not an example of a capital resource because it is not directly involved in the production of goods and services. If a resource or a capital good is not used to make goods and services that will generate income, it's not a capital resource. So my car at home, not a capital resource. I don't use that to generate an income. If I was a taxi driver, then it would be a capital resource. Explain the difference between trade-off and opportunity cost. Opportunity cost refers to the value of the next best alternative that is forgone when you make a decision, whereas a trade-off is all the other things you sacrifice when you make a particular decision. So opportunity cost, just the next best alternative. Trade-off is all the other alternatives when you make a particular choice. Define factors of production and explain why economists often refer to resources as factors of production. Factors of production refer to the productive inputs used to make goods and services that are sold in the market, and then consist of land, labour and capital and entrepreneurial resources. They are often referred to as factors of production because they are the key inputs in the production process that allow us to make goods and services. The higher the quality of a nation's factors of production or resources, the higher their living standards in general, assuming they use them effectively to make goods and services. Define the term opportunity cost and explain how it is linked to the concept of relative scarcity. Very common question. First of all, first marks, let's say this is 3 marks. 1 mark for defining opportunity cost. It's the next best alternative that is sacrificed. Make sure you include the word sacrificed whenever producers, consumers or the government decide to allocate their scarce resources in a particular fashion. Relative scarcity, define that as well, means our resources are limited relative to demands placed on them, and this forces economic agents to make choices or decisions about how to allocate their resources. Once the decision is made about how our resources will be allocated, it involves the sacrifice of an opportunity to use those resources in an alternative way, and this next best alternative is referred to as the opportunity cost. So that clear link between relative scarcity and limited wants and needs relative to limited resources, this forces us to make choices. Choices involve us sacrificing options. The next best alternative option is the opportunity cost. You can use an example there if you would like to as well. I'm not going to go through this as well. This is just when you make a car, you give up the opportunity to use other goods, to use your resources in other ways. We've gone through that question as well, and we've also gone through that question in detail as well. If it's a longer question that's worth 3 or 4 marks, I suggest you use an example. So if it's a 4-mark question, then you could go on and use an example about the government, for example, or having limited land resources, or anything that will show that option of opportunity cost. In terms of labour resources, you could talk about how you might want to become a doctor. The opportunity cost for you might be becoming a lawyer, for example, because that's your next best alternative. And last 2 questions, explain the difference between the accounting cost and the opportunity cost of a decision. Okay, accounting cost sounds complicated, but it's really just how much money you spend on something. So the accounting cost is just the dollar value. If I buy a $5 sandwich, the dollar value is $5. That's the accounting cost. The opportunity cost is what you forego or the next best alternative. So for example, if you're talking about building a skate park and it costs $10,000, $10,000 is not the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the next best alternative use of that $10,000. Explain the difference between the terms trade-off and opportunity cost. Trade-off again refers to the value of the next best option, whereas trade-off is all the other options. Thank you.